1975 in the city of Los Angeles, California, to Sharon and Dennis Rocha. She was the oldest of 2 children with a younger brother named Brent. Laci was described as bright, energetic, and determined, who loved being around people. Her childhood was spent in Modesto, California, after her family moved there when she was a young child. She attended Thomas Downey High School, where she was known for her friendly and outgoing personality, quickly making friends with classmates and teachers alike. Laci was a passionate individual who demonstrated a strong interest in animals and the outdoors. She loved to spend time at the beach and had a deep affection for nature. She had an active lifestyle, regularly participating in sports like volleyball, and she was particularly drawn to working with animals. Laci's family describes her as a responsible and caring person with a caring and supportive nature that made her a loving daughter, sister, and friend. In 1997, Laci graduated from high school, and shortly after, she began to develop a stronger interest in animal science. She attended Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo for a period, though she eventually transferred back to Modesto to attend college closer to home. During this time, she also worked various jobs, including a position at a local pet store where she could further immerse herself in her love for animals. It was also at this time that Laci met Scott Peterson, a man who would later become her husband. Scott Lee Peterson was born on October 24th, 1972, in the small town of Modesto, California, to Lee and Jackie Peterson. He was the only child of his parents, who were both highly regarded in their community. Scott's father, Lee, was a successful businessman who had made his fortune in agribusiness, while his mother was a teacher. Growing up, Scott had a seemingly idyllic childhood in a stable and loving home, and he was known to be a bright and ambitious young man. His parents emphasized education and hard work, encouraging Scott to pursue his goals and reach his full potential. Scott attended Modesto High School, where he was described as an athletic and competitive individual. He played several sports, including basketball and golf, and had a reputation for being a charming and popular student. Although Scott was an outstanding student in terms of academic achievement, he also displayed a carefree and sometimes rebellious attitude. He was known for often being the center of attention in social settings as well. After high school, Scott enrolled at Arizona State University in Tempe, where he majored in agricultural economics, following in his father's footsteps in the agribusiness world. In the mid-1990s, Scott returned to Modesto for work for his father's business, which had expanded into the sale of wholesale fertilizer. It was during this time that Scott met Laci, who would later become his wife. Laci was working at the local pet store when they were introduced through a mutual friend. Their initial meeting was said to have been the start of a whirlwind romance. Laci was drawn to Scott's charismatic personality, while Scott admired passion for animals. They quickly formed a connection and their relationship blossomed. Laci and Scott's engagement took place in 1997 and they married in 1998. Their wedding was an intimate affair attended by close friends and family. The couple settled into a home in Modesto where they lived together while Scott continued his work with his family's business. Laci, meanwhile, became involved in various local animal advocacy groups, furthering her passion for animals. The couple seemed happy and content, and by all accounts, they were well liked and admired by their peers. The couple's life together was centered around their shared values, which included a love for animals, the outdoors, and their community. Laci and Scott enjoyed spending time together, hiking, and taking part in activities that allowed them to connect with nature. They also enjoyed attending community events, such as the local Christmas parade, and were involved in neighborhood activities. In 2002, Laci and Scott announced that they were expecting their first child, a son. Laci's pregnancy was much anticipated by family and friends, and she was excited to become a mother. The couple was looking forward to the birth of their son, and Laci had already began preparing for the arrival of the baby, purchasing baby clothes and attending prenatal doctor's appointments. Laci's pregnancy was considered relatively uncomplicated, and she appeared to be in good health as she neared her due date in December of 2002. During this time, Scott was continuing his work with his family's business, though it was becoming clear that he was facing some personal struggles. Scott had become somewhat preoccupied with his own interests, spending time away from home and at times appearing detached from his wife. Laci's friends and family later noted that Scott was not as involved in the preparations for the birth as they would have expected. However, there were no major red flags that would indicate that their marriage was in serious trouble at the time. Now, Laci Peterson was last seen on the morning of December 24th, 2002, by her mother, Sharon. At the time, Laci was 8 months pregnant with a son she and Scott had already named Connor. The day began as a typical holiday morning for the Peterson family. Laci had planned to spend Christmas Eve at her mother's house, where she was supposed to prepare for the family gathering the following day. However, she had a few tasks to complete before she left for her mother's home. According to Scott, he and Laci had breakfast together at their Modesto, California home that morning. Scott, an avid fisherman, told police that he left the house around 9:30 a.m. to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina, about 90 miles away from Modesto. He claimed that Laci, who was walking the family dog Mackenzie, was still at home when he left. Laci's plans for the day including taking Mackenzie on the walk, then heading to her mother's house for Christmas preparations. She was last seen wearing a black maternity turtleneck and a pair of black pants. Scott Peterson's story would soon raise suspicions, as the timeline of events surrounding his actions and Laci's disappearance began to unravel. According to police, Laci's mother had received a phone call from Laci around 10:30 a.m., just after Scott had supposedly left for fishing. In that call, Laci told her mom that she was about to walk Mackenzie, and everything seemed normal. However, by the time Sharon arrived at Laci's home later that day to pick her up, Laci was gone, and the house appeared undisturbed. The Petersons' housekeeper, who arrived in the afternoon to clean the home, found Mackenzie in the backyard, still leashed with no sign of Laci. Mackenzie's leash was found tangled in the yard, a detail that would later become significant in the investigation. Laci's purse, keys, and wallet were still inside the home, and the car was parked in the driveway, but Laci herself was nowhere to be found. Once Laci was reported missing, law enforcement officials launched an immediate and extensive search. The search for Laci quickly garnered media attention, as the missing woman was 8 months pregnant, and her disappearance on Christmas Eve only deepened the public's concern. Hundreds of volunteers, as well as law enforcement agencies, were mobilized to search the area around Laci's home, and her case quickly became the subject of intense media scrutiny. Scott Peterson, initially cooperating with the authorities, claimed that he had last seen Laci that morning before leaving for his fishing trip. He told investigators that he arrived at the Berkeley Marina around 11:30 a.m. and began fishing shortly thereafter. He also stated that he was alone throughout the day and did not speak to anyone during this trip. However, his lack of concern during the initial stages of the investigation raised red flags. He never appeared to demonstrate the kind of emotional distress that would be expected from a husband whose wife was missing, and his actions, such as taking a long, isolated fishing trip during the busy holiday season, appeared unusual. Authorities soon learned that Scott had also been in contact with a woman named Amber Frey, a massage therapist with whom he had been having an affair. This information was significant because Scott had told Frey that he was not married and was expecting his first child. Police now began to suspect that Scott's behavior and the details of his fishing trip were part of a larger narrative, leading them to believe that his involvement in Laci's disappearance was more than coincidental. On April 13th, 2003, nearly 4 months after Laci's disappearance, a major breakthrough in the case occurred. A man walking his dog near the San Francisco Bay in Richmond, California, discovered the body of a woman washed up along the shoreline. The remains were found not far from the Berkeley Marina, where Scott Peterson had claimed to have been fishing on the day of Laci's disappearance. The remains were soon identified as Laci's, and a subsequent search of the area revealed the body of her unborn son, Connor, also washed up nearby. The discovery of their bodies raised crucial questions about the circumstances of their deaths and the timeline of events leading up to her disappearance. The discovery of the body prompted a forensic investigation by the authorities. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Laci's body was found about 90 miles from where she had been living in Modesto, near the Berkeley Marina. The body had been severely decomposed after months in the water, and the cause of death was not immediately clear. Medical examiners noted that Laci's remains had been in the water for several months, consistent with the fact that she had been missing since December, which means that she would have been killed immediately, either that day or somewhere in between. A key piece of evidence was the discovery of Laci's body, along with the one of her unborn son as well. Connor's body was found nearby, and it was determined that he had died before Laci, likely as a result of trauma to Laci's abdomen. The fetus was found to be around 8 months gestational age, and it was clear that Connor had been killed along with Laci. This finding led to a double murder charge, one for Laci and one for Connor. The initial autopsy of both of the bodies were inconclusive as to the exact cause of death due to the severe decomposition. However, there were several key findings still. Laci's body was discovered without clothing, except for the black maternity pants she had been wearing on the day she was last seen. The fact that she was found near the Berkeley Marina, an area close to where Scott had told police he had been fishing that day, raised further suspicions about whether Scott had been involved in her death. The remains were sent to forensic experts who conducted detailed tests to determine the cause of death. Medical examiners found that there were no signs of gunshot wounds or blunt force trauma to Laci's body, though there was evidence that the body had been submerged in water for an extended period. The pathologist could not pinpoint an exact cause of death, but concluded that Laci had likely died from a combination of strangulation and exposure to the elements. Forensic tests on Connor's remains revealed that he had died from blunt force trauma consistent with the trauma that would have been inflicted upon Laci's body during the attack. The medical examiner concluded that Connor had been killed in utero. Throughout the investigation, Scott Peterson's statements to police and his behavior began to raise suspicions. Initially, he appeared to be cooperative, giving authorities detailed accounts of his whereabouts on the day of Laci's disappearance. However, investigators soon found that Scott's account was inconsistent with the physical evidence and witness testimony. While he claimed to have been alone during his fishing trip, no one could verify his whereabouts during that time. Additionally, there were no signs that Scott had actually been fishing at the marina, as there was no evidence of him fishing in the area or leaving behind any fishing equipment. Authorities discovered that Scott had been in frequent contact with the woman that I mentioned earlier, Amber, whom he had been dating during the time of Laci's disappearance. Scott had told Frey that he was not married and that his wife was dead, a fact that he had concealed from her for months. This revelation came to light through phone records, and Frey became a key witness in the investigation, providing crucial details about Scott's deceptive behavior. The discovery of Scott's affair and his continued lies to investigators only fueled suspicions that he had something to hide. Moreover, Scott's calm demeanor throughout the investigation, his lack of emotional distress, and his failure to show genuine concern for his missing wife all cast doubt on his innocence. This led authorities to believe that Scott had orchestrated Laci's death to pursue his affair with Amber and free himself of the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood. On April 18th, 2003, after an extensive investigation and mounting evidence against him, Scott Peterson was arrested and charged with 2 felony counts of murder, one for Laci Pearson and one for her unborn child, Connor. Laci's affair. Investigators also scrutinized Scott's financial and personal life, looking for any motive that could explain why he might want to kill his wife and child. The double murder charges against Scott were supported by circumstantial evidence, including the discovery of his wife's remains near the area where he claimed to have been fishing, as well as inconsistencies in his statements to investigators. Scott Peterson's trial began in 2004, and it was an intense and highly publicized legal battle. The prosecution's phase focused on the motives for the murders, Scott's desire to escape his marriage and begin a new life with Amber Frey. The prosecution argued that Scott killed Laci to eliminate the obstacles in his life, including his wife and their child. The prosecution also presented evidence of Scott's affair with Frey, as well as his lies to police and his lack of emotion after Laci's disappearance. The defense team, led by attorney Mark Gagaros, sought to argue that there was insufficient evidence to convict Scott Peterson. They claimed that there was no direct proof linking Scott to the murders, and that the investigation had been flawed. The defense team attempted to cast doubt on the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses, including Amber Frey. They also suggested that someone else might have been responsible for the murders of Laci and Connor. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury ultimately found Scott Peterson guilty of 2 counts of murder. On November 12, 2004, Scott was convicted of first-degree murder for Laci's death and second-degree murder for Connor's. Scott Peterson was sentenced to death on December 12, 2004 for the murder of Laci. He was not sentenced to death for the murder of Connor, as the jury had convicted him of second-degree murder for that one. He was placed on death row at San Quentin State Prison, where he remains to this day, though his sentence has not yet been carried out. Over the years, public opinion surrounding Scott Peterson's conviction for the murder of his wife and Connor have been divided. While the majority of people believe that Scott is guilty, there is a growing sentiment of individuals, legal experts, and commentators who argue that Scott may be innocent, or that there were significant flaws in the investigation and trial that may have led to a wrongful conviction. Several factors contribute to this belief, and we're going to start first with a flawed investigation and inconsistent evidence. One of the primary reasons some people believe Scott Peterson may be innocent stems from the perceived flaws in the investigation. Many supporters argue that the Modesto Police Department and other law enforcement agencies involved in the case may have rushed to judgment by focusing too heavily on Scott Peterson without considering all possible leads. Critics point to several inconsistencies in the investigation, particularly around the timeline of Laci's disappearance. Scott Peterson's movements on the day of her disappearance were thoroughly scrutinized, and there was a lack of solid evidence that definitively placed him at Berkeley Marina. While there were witnesses who saw a vehicle matching the description of Scott's truck near the marina, there were no clear signs that Scott had actually been fishing. Additionally, there were issues with the forensic evidence presented during the trial. The condition of Laci's body when it was found, along with Connor's remains, made it difficult to determine an exact cause of death. Some forensic experts suggested that the decomposition of the bodies meant that conclusions Assumptions about how and when Laci and Connor died could not be made with certainty. Another point of contention for those who believe Scott may be innocent is the mysterious circumstances surrounding Laci's disappearance. The family dog Mackenzie was found in the Petersons' backyard, still leashed. The dog's behavior and its location have been questioned by some who believe it could be indicative of someone else's involvement. If Laci had indeed been walking Mackenzie at the time of her disappearance, why was the dog found at home, seemingly undisturbed and unharmed? Additionally, some have pointed to the fact that Laci was known to be a responsible woman who would have not left without informing anyone. The idea that she disappeared without a trace has led some to question whether she could have been abducted or met with foul play by someone else. Another commonly cited reason for believing Scott Peterson is guilty is his behavior after Laci's disappearance. His calm and detached demeanor, especially in interviews and public appearances, had led many to believe that he was hiding something. However, there is also a growing argument that his behavior may have been misinterpreted. People argue that Scott, like many individuals facing extreme pressure and trauma, could be in a state of shock or emotional numbness. His lack of overt emotion or visible distress during media interviews could have been misread as guilt rather than a normal reaction to a traumatic event. Next, Amber Frey, the woman with whom Scott Peterson was having an affair, played a significant role in the investigation and trial. She became a key witness for the prosecution after it was revealed that Scott had lied to her about being married and about the status of his wife. Some critics, however, believe that Frey's testimony was overly influential in securing Scott's conviction. There is a theory that Frey's testimony was strategically used to paint Scott as a liar and a manipulator, but some contend that this may have overshadowed the actual evidence related to Laci's death. Frey's involvement in the case led to an increased focus on Scott's character flaws, which some believe overshadowed the need for a deeper investigation into other potential suspects or motives. There is a school of thought that suggests that Amber Frey, by cooperating with authorities, may have inadvertently helped fuel the narrative that Scott was guilty, even if the hard evidence did not fully support that conclusion. The case of Laci Peterson's murder continues to capture the attention of the public. The investigation and trial raised important questions about the role of media in criminal cases, the reliability of circumstantial evidence, and the pursuit of justice. While Scott Peterson's conviction has been upheld, the case continues to generate debate about whether he was rightfully or wrongly convicted. Regardless of the outcome, Laci's death remains a tragic reminder of the devastating consequences of violence, and her family continues to grieve the loss of a beloved daughter, sister, and mother. So that, you guys, is the case of Laci Peterson. Please let me know your thoughts below in the comments, what you think happened, if you think Scott Peterson